Welcome to the podcast. It starts with you, with me, Vic O'Farrell. I ask my guests, by understanding their own behaviours and personality style, what impact on their lives, both personally and professionally, has there been? What is it like to live and work with someone of your style? I mean, this is not about labelling people, putting people in boxes, or an excuse for bad behaviour. It's about recognising, understanding and respecting that we're all different. And what impact can you have on others by looking in the mirror? Because it starts with you. So welcome to another episode of It Starts With You. And today, gorgeous Antoinette has joined me. In fact, Antoinette, I will let you do your introductions. If you could let the listeners know what you're, who you are, what you're all about, but also what your profile is in terms of the disc style.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Vic. And it is just fabulous to be here with you. And in a nutshell, I am a Gravitas expert. I have a book called Leading with Gravitas, which came out about 9 years ago now, and another book called Power Up, the Smart Woman's Guide to Unleashing Her Potential. And both of those books really are at the core and center of my business. I work with corporate organizations predominantly, running leadership development programs, whether that's extended or bite-sized, masterclasses around that whole theme of gravitas. And I also work around furthering the cause of women in business. So I'm really, really passionate about helping women get to the top and stay there. And executive coach. And I do quite a lot of keynote speaking, both virtually and in person. So in terms of my disc profile, I would say that it has evolved. I know inherently we kind of remain the same, but because of the environment that I've been, it's evolved through my life. So I used to be in the corporate world, as I mentioned. I used to work in PR. And I remember being part of a senior leadership team, and it was an absolute nightmare because we were all really kind of drawing on our red, so being the more domineering, dominant, driving side of things. And it was a nightmare because we all had very strong opinions. We tend to argue quite a lot and nothing really got done. And then we had a steady green person who really had an extremely valuable point of view to share, but simply didn't get heard and got trodden on quite a lot. So that was the culture that I was in, and I don't think really naturally underneath it that was me. And so, as time has passed, as I set up my own business, I very quickly realized that if I drew on my kind of natural defaults that I was used to in the corporate world, I simply wouldn't have a business. So I think I've become a lot more well-rounded in all aspects of it, and just allowed more of the influence, the eye to come through. I think that I'm probably engaging and successful when it comes to inspiring and bringing other people with me when I draw on that. I'm much more, if I'm working in banking, or if I'm working with engineers, or if I'm working in sectors that are not naturally me, I have to really remind myself to get clear and be specific and go into detail, which is just not my default. And I think through being a coach and really working on my emotional intelligence, that sort of helped me bring out more of my green. So yeah, I would say generally high I, high D, and work in progress on the S and the C.
I like what you said there about understanding when you're going into an environment that you predominantly know is going to be far more on the reserved side of things, far more the blues and the greens. And just from what you said there, it's picking up on the emotional intelligence, because this is all great, isn't it? Understanding profiles is amazing, but unless you then add the layer of emotional intelligence over it and use it and not go, oh, well, and label people and excuse for bad behaviour, it's like, well, actually, no, let's learn that I can adapt and flex who I am and help other people. So now that you know, or having known what your profile is, How would you say that that has impacted on your life, both personally and professionally?
I think knowing my profile has given me pause for thought and an appreciation of flexibility. And so I've created this term called managed authenticity. And when I say this to people, they're like, what the hell's that? That's just such a contradiction in terms. How can you manage your authenticity? And whilst I think authenticity is really important, whether it's, in your personal life or at work, being yourself, being true to yourself, being consistent, not flip-flopping around. I have met many people, I think especially in the corporate world, who's like, I'm being an authentic leader, and they're authentically crashing around, upsetting people, on their way to HR, particularly in the environment of diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not good enough to just let it all hang out and revert to your most natural self. We have to be attuned to the other people around us. And so I think it's taught me the importance of tuning into who I am, but also the potential to manage it and flex and develop. And so that pause for thought, I think, not every time, but certainly more often than not now in my personal and my professional life, when I've been triggered by someone, like they've done something and they've said something, and it's like, the red is about to like literally set fire to the building. I'm like, Antoinette, pause for thought. Is it okay for you to be angry and allow that to be seen? Or actually, is that not the appropriate thing to do? And what other choices have you got? Whether it, using the disc lens or any other lens around, what other choices have I got?
Mm. And but when you just say about flipping and letting the red D set towards the building, and I know, because I know when I go under pressure, I flip from ID, so yellow red, to DI, so that the red is more
Okay.
dominant. And I know that, and I, again, like you, can pause for thought. How would you help the listeners that are thinking, okay, so if I'm now dealing with someone perhaps who I see is a very D high red dominant style, but they are very, you mentioned it at the very beginning here, where when you were working in PR, there was a very steady green style that just got trodden on. What advice would you give to that green style to deal with the red style?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I think that the tendency for anyone actually who's in the face of someone who's exploding is to, if you're high D yourself, to meet fire with fire, and God knows where that's going to end up. But for a lot of us, become aggressive and like shout and slam and slanging and match and all of that. For the rest of us, I think a big tendency is to go into the opposite, to go into flight and to shut down altogether, or to run away, or to remove ourselves, because it just doesn't feel safe, and it quite possibly isn't safe. So what to do in those situations? Well, I've learned to use that pause for thought. So I created this technique called the power pause, which I found really, really useful. And when I share it with other people, they seem to find it really, really useful as well. And so it's a step-by-step process. And you start off by noticing that you've been triggered. So someone does something, someone says something, you're like, whoa, I can feel it. And you notice that by getting tuned into your own physical response to that. So what happens? Do you get sweaty? Do you like tense up? Does your jaw get tight? Do you get the old palpitations, or a whole, cocktail of all of that? And then you notice what's going in your head. How dare they say that? Or what the hell's going on? Or actually, I'm feeling really scared now. Or whoa, what do I do? I just want to lose. I just want to run away. So notice it first. That's the first step, and you'll get signs in your body and in your mind. The second step is to then, and this is the most powerful thing, if we do nothing else, in the face of any kind of triggering situation is to breathe. And I'm doing it now just because you breathe, and what that does is it interrupts the fight or flight response, it calms you down, it ensures that oxygen is going to other parts of your body than the ones that are there wanting to fight or run away. And so you then get more capacity to think rationally in your brain as well. So simply to take a breath, that also gives you a few nanoseconds. And in those nanoseconds, then the third step is to think, how am I feeling right now? And put a label on it. So am I feeling livid, or am I feeling scared, or am I feeling out of control or impotent or frustrated, or how am I feeling? Because that again starts bringing rational thought back. That's the third step. And then the fourth step is to think, well, is that actually how I want to be feeling? Do I want to be feeling livid, out of control, frustrated, scared, impotent, whatever? Yes or no? Because sometimes actually it's really powerful to channel anger, or whichever one. If it's a no, then how do I want to be feeling instead? So I want to feel calm, for example, or I want to feel powerful, or I want to feel in control, or I want to feel ready, or whatever it is. And whichever word you tell yourself, that will naturally affect how you feel physically, but also how you feel mentally as well. So that's the next step. Put a label on how you want to feel. And then the final step is to act. And so you've got a number of steps that will affect you both mentally and physically, which will create that gap between you being triggered and you responding. Because usually there's no gap at all, and we just kind of lose it in whatever way. And I found that that's been really, really helpful. I used it with someone who used to always, always, always trigger me, and I'd always go into flight. I'd always shut down and go, which possibly used to irritate them even more. And there was this one time I was like, right, come on, Antoinette, you've created this power pause. You've written a book called Power Up. Now is your time to shine. So it's like, okay, right. How am I feeling? I nearly dropped the F on them. Effing livid, said we wouldn't do that. How do I want to be feeling? Rational and in control. How am I going to respond? Okay, so X person, you always do this. This always comes up. I'm finding this extremely challenging, and I don't want to go through this anymore. So this is how we're going to play it now. So it proves to me that that works. I used it in that context. I also used it quite a lot in the pandemic through anxiety and stress and emotional trauma, and driving in my car and thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have a panic attack. Okay, I've got my power pause. So it's a really valuable technique in many different contexts.
It does. It does. And like you say, it's that breathe part, isn't it? It's because we don't, and it only needs to be, seconds of stop.
Yes.
But what you said there about how you reacted, and I often say it to my clients and the people that I meet in terms of a green, an S steady style coming up against an angry red D, is when you do stop to diffuse a situation, because let's also say that the S can stand for strong and stubborn, but
Okay.
the minute they actually will push back, especially to a red, and say, well, hold on a minute, I don't like this situation. You've challenged me before. Can we stop? Actually, I think reds then totally respect. They're like, okay, because we've got to remember that reds, they do have emotional intelligence, but they don't, they if they're dealing with red, they're naturally with other reds. They're naturally, that driven, that they're demanding, that suddenly somebody challenges them. Well, actually, they thrive on a problem and a challenge. So if someone actually says, I don't like the way you're behaving, it's like, oh, okay. And it stops them in their track. And it makes them actually think, oh, okay, what are we doing here?
Yes. And that's exactly what happened with this person. And then the following day, they apologized. I was
Yeah.
like, wow, why didn't I do that before? My God, it's been decades.
but that is also a red with emotional intelligence. They've apologised, because they don't often apologise, do they? Because that's taking their foot off the gas, and I might be getting taken advantage of here, or I don't want people to slow down. So let's look at the other two colours then, the yellow and the blue, in terms. And I know, just because I am yellow and you're yellow, and without that layer of emotional intelligence, I knew that my eyes probably stood for irritating. It was yeah, talk, bring it, story. It's that Chaz and Dave, isn't it? You're becoming a pest. But how? Because I know I've done it before, but a blue just doesn't turn around and say stop. You shut up. So how? And again, would you be offended if you had a blue that just turned around and said, Antoinette, can we get back on track, please? Because you seem to have gone off on a complete tangent and I don't know where we are.
I wouldn't be offended at all.
No.
No, not at all.
No. And nor would I. So it's saying that to anyone that's listening that is blue, that is the C style, actually just telling us to bring it back on track. We forget that we've gone off on a tangent, don't we?
Yeah. I think there's that, and then there's also the you obviously know a lot more about this than I do, but I think sometimes when we go off on a yellow kind of extravaganza of, standing on a podium and,
For those of you that are listening, you should see the eye. Go and find it on the YouTube channel and you'll know exactly where I meant with this. Antoinette just went into something. You look like some spaced out kind of. Oh, yeah.
So, what I've learned is that can be really scary for people, It's like, oh, we could do this and we could do this, it'd be amazing. And how are you? And PR, kissy. And they're like, whoa. So I really learned very quickly when I started working in investment banking with clients in that space. I couldn't be that PR chick over there. I had to just, calm it all down.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So to that scariness, how to do that? How to bring it back, do you think?
Well, again, it's the emotional intelligence layer of understanding when you do it. But I can get triggered by really high yellows when they have no self-awareness of their own behaviour. And you tell a story, or you're in the middle of just, and they take over the conversation.
Yes.
Their own story.
Yes.
And what you want to do is you want to say right there and then, like, no.
Yes.
Don't do that. But you don't. But then you kind of think, I've got to talk to you again, because I've got to make you aware of how irritating that can be for other people, especially other people who are the same style as you.
Yes, that's so true. And I talk about, the light, classic, that analogy, shining your light. But it's like, go forth, shine your light, be bright, be fabulous, but not at the expense of others. Don't eclipse other people.
No.
Give other people space. There's room enough on the stage for everybody, and it can be tremendously irritating when someone does that.
But I mean, I use it. So for those of you listening, both Antoinette and I met through the Professional Speaking Association. And as we're recording this, I'm the current regional president for London. And when I'm getting on that stage, my eye comes up. I have my walk on music. I've got everything I want, because I want everyone to feel engaged. But I also know that there are people in the audience that are not that style. And I've probably either messaged with them, or I've spoken to them before, and I know who they are, so I don't point them out in the audience. I don't make a thing. I don't even, sometimes I kind of give them a little bit of eye contact so that they know that I'm there, but eye contact with the security of, I'm not about to point you out, you're safe.
Yes.
Whereas you've got the other people, the outgoing people that just want, they want the attention. And so you make that facial gesture, don't you? It's all the body language of like, yes, exactly. And I know you. And you can then give me that body language back. And it's like, right, okay, that's your not ego massage. I don't mean to say it like that, but that's your that's what you're motivated by, and I've now rubbed that bit of motivation on you and say you're going to be all pumped, and you're not wanting it, and how many people get up, and it's not about, you know, giving keynotes or being on stage. It could even be as a leader delivering a message to his team. How does that self-awareness, you know, and is that part of the gravitas that you talk about and your programs become, you know, you teach that emotional level?
Definitely, definitely. And it is all about that sort of being attuned and tailoring. Talk about emotional intelligence, and back to this firm, is the investment banking firm. I remember one session I ran and I said, and it was a group of, I think there must have been about 20 men. They're all men, coincidentally, and me. And I said, okay, so guys, today we're going to do a session on emotional intelligence. And you could physically see all of them kind of like removing themselves, like leaning back, closing their arms. It's like, God, this is going to be like, you know, wading through treacle. And not appreciating the importance of it, or being open to how to learn it. It's I think we need to almost create a new language. Perhaps DISC is part of that, to get it into people's heads without them realizing, so so they don't have that resistance. So yeah, what was your question again?
I was talking about, how do you get people to understand it? Could, you know, understand your audience. If it's about keynoting, it's about leaders delivering a message and understanding that everyone in the audience is going to be a different style. You're going to have your people that want the attention, and you're going to have your people that want the security. How do you teach that as part of your gravitas?
So what I do is, again, I've created this whole school of thinking around that managed authenticity and that flexibility. And so I ask people, and I use the analogy of hats. And so this is kind of inspired by Daniel Goleman, you know, the grandfather of emotional intelligence, who talked about that there are a number of different leadership styles. And he used the analogy of golf clubs. So depending on what hole you're approaching, you'll pull out a different golf club that will enable you to hit the ball in the right way. And so I was like, that's great. I love that. I want to build on that. And so my analogy is around leadership hats. And so I'll ask people, I'll put up a whole load of different types of hats on the screen. And not like a Stetson and like a Dolly Parton number or a beanie, or, you know, we do that exercise around that. But, you know, hats might be strategist or facilitator or creative or coach or visionary, or which, a whole load of different types of approach. And I'll ask them, you know, what's your go-to, and then we'll play a game to get them to put on different types of hats and to see and feel how that feels. And the fascinating thing is that when someone puts on a strategist hat, they will naturally become more strategic. When someone puts on a coach hat, they become more open and more listening. More, if they put on a facilitative hat, it's more like that. Or if they put on a visionary hat, they're probably more red, more D, or more I. And so that's my route to helping people to flex, that goes broader than maybe the sort of polar opposites of one another. And also then becomes quite practical. It's like, okay, so if I'm going into the situation, I need to wear this hat. So they then authentically morph into it.
Yeah, a bit like you do with your the breathing, you know. Yeah. Your pause for thought when you said we were driving and suddenly you were thinking about, oh my God, I'm going to start having a panic attack. Actually, let's pause for thought and understand. And it is that, but it's using it all day, every day, isn't it? And I think when you do, like we do, it becomes second nature, doesn't it? So how can you, what piece of advice, just because I'm, you know, kind of thinking to sum up here, what piece of advice would you give to people that don't use it every day but want to? What kind of practice can they put in place so that they can become very self-aware of their own style?
Well, I think the starting point is to start by actually having some form of assessment to know what yours is, because you might assume that you're this or that or the other. But that's the great thing about DISC, is that we have an element of all of this within us, which shows that we have the potential to flex into each and any one of those. So start by self-awareness is the first step, and then just become curious. I think curiosity is the key, really. Curious about your own reactions to things, curious about other people's reactions to things, especially when other people's reactions to things are going to be different from yours. It's like, whoa, it's not like I don't like them, or they're not my kind of person, or that was weird. It's like, oh, that was interesting. Let me just be curious about that. And I think that then opens up the potential for our own self-development, but also the potential for emotional intelligence and the potential for greater connections with a whole range of different types of people, including and especially those people who don't naturally fit into their my kind of tribe mold.
I love that. And I think that's an absolutely fabulous way to kind of sum up where we are. Be curious.
Yeah.
Be more curious.
Yeah.
Amazing. Oh, we could talk for hours on this, but I'm going to bring it to a close here. So, Antoinette, if people want to get hold of you, what's the best way? And obviously in the show notes, there's going to be lots of contacts there, but the best way for people to get hold of you?
Well, the first places to go is my website, which is AntoinetteDaleHenderson.com. And if people want to read up more about Gravitas, they can check out my book, Leading with Gravitas, available on the website, but also any online bookstore. Or if people want to power up women, or if you know women who want to fulfill their potential, then there's Power Up. And I also have these open courses. So a couple of times a year I run a one-day Gravitas masterclass in London. A couple of times a year I run a two-day Gravitas for Women course as well. And clearly, if people are interested in the work that I do in corporates, whether that's keynoting, coaching, or extended leadership development programs, then yeah, I'd love to have a chat.
Marvelous. Okay. Well, thank you all for listening. It's been great to talk to you, Antoinette, and I will catch up with you very soon.
Thank you so much. It's been great.
How has this conversation had an impact on you? What have you learnt? What will you do differently? Do leave a review on Apple or Spotify on It Starts With You podcast. And also leave a comment down below. Do also then connect with me on social media. I'm on Instagram, Facebook and LinkedIn. And why not even join the Facebook group It Starts With You and keep the learning ongoing. Thank you for listening.